So this is our fourth session, and I'm continuing to talk about the engaging skills. So I'll go a little more into depth in those, and then introduce the focusing task also toward the end of this session today. I plan to include two demonstrations, and also have two exercises. So last time I talked about the basic engaging skills of asking open questions when possible, rather than just closed short answer questions, to comment positively on what people are doing and on their own strengths, to practice reflective listening, and to offer summaries. And you'll be seeing a demonstration of these, and also you'll have an opportunity to practice these in two exercises today. One thing that came up last time was, well, what if the person I'm talking to is very silent, doesn't really speak much? And I mentioned a video that I did 25 years ago, I think, in which my task was to demonstrate reflective listening. I did not know to whom I would be speaking. So until we sat down in front of the camera, I had not met this man before. And all I knew was that he had been told he needed to talk to somebody. So I didn't know the content of what we would be talking about also. And you can access this and other demonstrations online at this link, which will be in the slideshow when it is shared with you. But I thought it might be useful to show this to you today. And while you're watching, I'd like you to keep account of two things. When do I ask questions? So if you hear a question, just keep a little mark of that. And if you hear a reflection, mark that down too. So if you've got a little bit of paper with you, to just be tracking how many questions, how many reflections. So it's something for you to do while we're listening to this 9-minute demonstration. So here we go. I hope it all works sound-wise.
John, you called up and indicated that you'd like to talk to someone here, and so I'd like to know how I might be helpful to you.
Had to come because of problems.
So some problems you've been having, and someone has made you come here.
Yeah.
And you're not too happy about that.
I just like to take care of my own problems, but
So talking to somebody else about them is hard. It's not something you're used to doing.
no.
And yet someone else has said you need to be here. Tell me a little bit about that.
My wife, she wants to she works and I work and take care of the kids together. She says she wants to go back to school, study to be a nurse or something. I don't think she needs to.
That seems silly to you.
And we're just doing okay.
You like things the way they are
Yeah.
now, and that feels like a real big change.
Yeah.
There's some things about it in particular that you don't like.
It's just everything's okay.
So why change? Why mess it up? Things are going along okay, and now she wants to get some more school, get some more education, and it's disturbing. It changes things.
She's got the kids, She's got her job.
already has enough to keep her busy.
I think so, but she don't. So we argue.
You're happy with the way things are. She's not quite satisfied with how things are, and she wants something else. She wants to get some education. And that's not okay with you.
She says things will be better. Like, I can see that, I guess, but I don't. She's got plenty to do, everything's okay. She just keeps on and on about it.
It's really important to her.
I guess. Sometimes I just wish she'd shut up,
And you're worried maybe that things will be worse if she goes back to school, that somehow it won't be as good as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, she would go back to school and, flunk out, or she might go back to school and decide she don't want nothing no more. She don't want no family.
So one thing that might happen that would hurt a lot if she went back to school, she might decide she didn't want to be with you any longer. That's a worry. And she's really important to you.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's not her getting the education that troubles you. It's how that may affect your relationship.
Yeah, so, she's smart enough,
Doesn't need any more.
Sometimes she's too smart.
Already. What other kinds of troubles are there? Sounds like that's one piece of it. What else is happening?
She just goes on and on about it, Just, I try to eat and she talks about it. Try to sleep and she talks about it. I come home from work and she talks about it. I'm just like, oh man.
So it's like nagging. It's just constantly there.
It seems to be.
And you get real angry about that.
Yeah. She just don't know when to stop.
Even though you're feeling angry about it, she just keeps pushing. She keeps.
Yeah, I tell her enough.
But still, she keeps talking about it. Yeah. And what is it that has happened that has caused someone to say you need to be here? Was it your wife that said you need to come here?
I told her to stop. I told her, she wouldn't. I was tired, I was tired. Come home from work and I was tired.
You kind of got pushed to the limit.
Yeah. So I kind of slapped her,
Mm-hmm. And that's what led to your being here when you hit her.
Yeah. I guess somebody heard. I guess somebody saw. I don't know. They called the cops.
And the police came around.
Yeah. They told me, asked me if I've been drinking. I told them I hadn't. They asked me if I was doing other junk, and I said, no, man. And then finally talked to one of them and said I need to get some, I need to see somebody. They told me I couldn't do that again, go to jail. So here I am.
What do you make of that, of you hitting her? Is does that seem to you like it was the natural thing to do? You just got pushed to the limit? Do you feel badly about that?
No, I do feel bad about it because, the kids saw,
So it's a matter of asking open questions, leaving enough silence for the person to think, to talk to you about it. So there's a patient silence with it. And then staying right with the person. A lot of the reflections that I offered were what I called last time continuing the paragraph. And we'll take a look at that again this time too. But what I'm saying might be the next sentence in the paragraph, rather than just repeating what he has said. Some repetition is okay too, but lots of reflection. My own count, and if your count is different from mine, that's fine. I counted 5 questions that I asked and 24 reflections. So lots of staying with him, lots of being sure that I'm hearing what he is saying, and he knows that I'm hearing what he's saying, understanding it, trying hard to stay with him. So that I just included that as a demonstration because there was the question last time of, well, what do you do if the person isn't talking? And that was my exact situation. My assignment this time was just to demonstrate reflective listening. And I didn't know who I was going to talk to. And about 45 seconds into the conversation, I'm thinking, great, I'm supposed to demonstrate reflective listening, and here's a guy who's not talking. But by the end of the session, we're talking about equally. So you can see the engaging process happening there. So that's why I wanted to include this demonstration. Now you get a chance to practice the oars. And this is non-directed. This is just staying with the person. You'll be in a breakout room for 18 minutes, and there should be 4 of you in each breakout room. And please do go to your breakout room so that you're there as a partner. We're planning 2 rounds. In each round, one of you will be a speaker, one of you will be a listener, and then 2 people will be observers. And you can decide who has what role in each of the rounds. When you're the speaker, when it's your turn to be the person who's talking about yourself, about just something that you're experiencing, the topic is something that you feel 2 ways about and haven't really made up your mind about. And we all have these all the time. It can be some change you're considering, something that's coming up in your life, some situation. Can be a political issue or a moral issue or a politician or whatever. Can be some social ethical issue, some decision that lies ahead for you, whatever, just something that's okay to talk about with 3 other people. But it's something that you're ambivalent about. You're kind of drawn in 2 different directions and really haven't made up your mind yet. When you're the listener, your job is to do what I was doing, which is to use oars, to ask some open questions, to affirm what you see, particularly reflective listening. So as you're developing that skill, now practice it. You can pull together several reflections and give a summary of things you've heard so far. I don't think I gave one of those in this short interaction with John, but A summary basically is just several of the things you have reflected pulled together. Don't offer advice of your own. Don't offer your own opinion. Keep out of the process. Your whole job is really to understand the person's dilemma, to understand the ambivalence they're talking about, and keep your balance, careful not to take sides. Which you can do, by the way, even by asking more about one side than the other, or reflecting more one side than the other. But it's not your job to influence the person's choice. It's not your job to fix it. It's your job to understand what the person is telling you. And so that's the task. And when you're an observer, please do the same thing that I asked you to do when you were watching my demonstration. But now keep track of all four of the ors. So when you hear what sounds like an open question, just make a little mark. If you hear something that sounds affirmative, a person commenting positively on what the person is saying, mark that down. When you hear reflections, count those. And if you hear the person kind of reflecting two or more things the person has said before, that's a summary. So count that as a summary. And then we'll ask the observers to give some feedback. So you need to be keeping these counts so that you can say to your partners what you observed as an observer. And the way it will work is in each 9-minute round, first you have to decide who's going to be the speaker, who's going to be the listener. The speaker starts by briefly describing something you feel two ways about. Don't give a long speech about it. Just here's the topic. The listener uses just ors, and you'll have just 6 minutes to try to get an understanding of the dilemma. And then there will be a signal that will be provided by my colleagues in Bangalore that it's time to end the conversation after 6 minutes of conversation. At that point, it's time for the observers to give your feedback of what you observed. What was the balance of questions and reflections and so on. Then there'll be a second round. Again, decide who's going to be the speaker and listener. Again, 6-minute conversation with the listener using ors, and this can be a different listener this time. And then when the signal comes from my colleagues that the 6 minutes is over, then it's time for the observers to give some feedback of what they observed. And if you don't get a turn to be a speaker in these two rounds, you will have another opportunity in practice number 6, which is coming up. What I want to do now is just take a little more time to give you some detail about reflective listening skills, which are so key in motivational interviewing. When you're offering reflections, one issue is how much of a guess do you make, or how deep is your reflection? What we call simple reflections are basically just repeating what the person said, maybe with a little bit of change, maybe just finding a synonym, but not adding much to what the person said to begin with. What we call a complex reflection makes a guess, something the person hasn't quite said yet, but might be what they mean. And you saw that in the demonstration that I did. Many of my reflections were anticipating things that I think were going on just from watching his nonverbals, but he hadn't quite said that. And when you're doing that, when you're making a guess, it can be just, it's almost like you're asking a question. Do you mean this? But you don't ask it as a question, you make it as a statement. It can be continuing the paragraph and saying what might be the next thing the person might say. It can be a double-sided reflection, which I will talk about in just a bit. You can be reflecting the underlying emotion as well. Now, here's an example of continuing the paragraph. And usually each reflection is a guess about what it might mean. So the client says, it's been a pretty rough week, and you don't know what else there is behind that. The listener says, you've been having a hard time, which not that much of a guess, all right? I'll say, nothing seems to be going right, says the client. Not the way you hoped. Just a little bit of a guess, just adding a little more to it. I guess I'm not surprised really, but our daughter's been spending time again with friends we told her she shouldn't see anymore. She just doesn't listen. You're pretty worried about her. Now it's there, but the person hasn't said that directly yet. So it's keeping the conversation moving. Continuing the paragraph does that, keeps it moving more. Worried, says the client. She wound up in the emergency room the night before last. So you're more than worried. We just don't know what to do. I feel like we've tried everything to get her on the right track, but she's not thinking about her future. It's like she doesn't care. You do care, though, says the listener, and you aren't willing to give up on her. Now, the client hadn't said that, but it's there, or it might be what they mean at least. So rather than just repeating what the person said, you're making a little bit of a guess. I just feel so helpless sometimes. So that's the way continuing the paragraph goes. Instead of just repeating what the person has just said, you're making a little bit of a guess of what might be next. And that kind of reflecting tends to move the conversation along much more quickly. It goes deeper and faster. Now, an emotion-focused reflection is one that either directly or indirectly is reflecting what seems to be the feeling underneath what the person is saying. They may not have said anything directly about how they're feeling, but you're commenting on it. And by the way, when you're reflecting a feeling, you're also choosing words that have to do with the intensity of the feeling. So here are some examples about the emotion of anger. In English, some low anger words are annoyed, irritated, frustrated. So they contain anger, but it's not at a high level in the word. Some medium anger words are angry, mad, cross with the person. And these vary a lot with culture, of course. And some high anger words, livid, furious, outraged. So you're not only commenting on an emotion, but you're picking a word that has to do with the intensity of that emotion. And then you can add words that also modify it, like you're a little bit angry, you're very angry, you're really angry, irritated a lot, you're very frustrated. So the way you word things is giving back to the person your sense of intensity of the emotion. Now, suppose a client says to you, I'm mad at my friend, at Joe, whatever. He upset me. How is the client going to respond if your reflection is understated? You're a little annoyed with him. I find what people usually do when I understate the emotion is that they say, well, no, I'm more than a little annoyed, and they'll tell you more about it. If you just match the intensity, you're pretty angry with him. The person will keep talking to you. If you amplify it, if you use a word that's kind of bigger in intensity, you're really furious with him. It might be right, but I find often clients will back away from it with a big word like that. So, well, it's not that much, So it also matters the intensity of the word that you choose to reflect an emotion. So that's just some of the art involved in reflective listening. Then a double-sided reflection. This is one where you're picking up both sides of ambivalence, and you'll have an opportunity to do this in just a bit. Here's a client who says, I know smoking is bad for my health, and my children hate it when I smoke, but it's one of the only real pleasures I have left, and I don't know how I would ever relax without my cigarettes. So they're giving you two sides of it. And this is very common when people are talking to you and they're ambivalent. You'll hear both sides. Here's a double-sided reflection. You wonder how you'd get along without tobacco. And at the same time, you can see how it hurts both you and your family. And I would always try to keep my reflections a little bit shorter than what the person said, if possible. But both sides of it are there. Now, here are a couple of tips. First of all, it matters what you say last. If you say this reflection as it's written here, you wondered how you get along without tobacco. And at the same time, you can see how it hurts both you and your family. The next thing the person is going to say is probably about the hurtfulness of tobacco. If you reverse the order, you can see how smoking hurts both you and your family, and you also wonder how you'd get along without tobacco. Now the person's likely to talk about how difficult it would be for them to get along without smoking. So the order of a double-sided reflection matters. Again, this is just some of the artfulness and complexity in double-sided reflection and reflective listening. And then, should you put a but in the middle, or should you put an and in the middle? You wonder how you'd get along without tobacco, but at the same time, you can see how it hurts both you and your family. What's the difference there? But almost functions like an eraser, but sort of discounts what went before. If you're getting an evaluation from your employer and the employer says, you've been doing a really good job this year and we appreciate the work you've been doing, but that says what comes next is maybe the most important thing. So choosing but or and matters as well. I usually try to put and in the middle if I'm trying to help the person see both sides of it. But does sort of devaluate or a little bit diminish what goes before the but. So, and you'll hear clients do that too. I know smoking is bad for me, but, and then they'll give you a reason why they need to smoke. Okay, this is one of the more complex exercises that we're going to do, and I call it reflection with forethought. So let me take a little time to explain this to you, and then I do plan to demonstrate it for you as well, so you can see how it works. But it's important because it illustrates what you're thinking, what's going on in your head while you're about to make a reflection. So again, there'll be groups of 4, and please do join your group so you don't leave your colleagues without a person there. One person will be the speaker, one person will be the listener, and then there'll be 2 or sometimes 3 colleagues there. And here are the jobs for you. If you're the speaker, again, the topic is the same as it was in the last exercise. Something you feel 2 ways about, something you're ambivalent about, and haven't made up your mind, haven't decided about. And again, we all have these all the time, so very normal. So decide who will be the speaker, who's going to be the listener. Speaker starts out with giving us just a short summary of the topic, like a minute or less, of what it is that they're feeling 2 ways about. And then before responding, the listener talks to the other clients, the other colleagues, the other people in the group. And together you say, now what could we reflect? What reflection might we offer here? So rather than immediately responding to the speaker, you're taking time to think together with your colleagues. What could we say next? What might be a simple reflection? Just repeating, What might be a more complex reflection? Did we hear 2 sides, and could we offer a double reflection? And what would that look like? There seemed to be a feeling underneath it, and could we reflect the feeling? And if we reflect the feeling, do you want to use a big word, an amplified word, or kind of understated word? Maybe we could find a reflection that continues the paragraph. So you see, there's so many different ways to offer a reflection. And in this little conversation between the listener and the colleagues, you'll be thinking about what could we reflect next? Then after a little discussion like that, and you have a few options, then the listener will choose one of those reflections and say it to the speaker. and then speaker responds naturally. And then you repeat the process. So that's the process. And because it's a little bit complex, I want to demonstrate it for you with 3 colleagues from Bangalore who have offered to participate in this. So let me stop sharing for the moment and find my colleagues here. Dr. Arun, I think, is going to be the speaker here and is going to just to say a little bit about the topic that he has in mind. And here I have 2 colleagues. Great. Hey, yeah. So what is it you're kind of feeling 2 ways about at this point?
I never thought that I will sit over here and talk this about my difficulties in terms of cutting down my caffeine consumption over here. See, I was always um, that something is my thing, right? I the morning I get up, I have to have a coffee, and then the next, and then the next. In a day, 7 to 8 cups of coffee. It actually runs me and makes me to focus on my work, and that's that's my high. It didn't bother anybody else. I could get to do all my activities.
Okay,
But
that's
unfortunately,
good. We have lots of material already here. So yeah. So let's talk about what kinds of reflection we could offer. What would be just a nice simple reflection? Yeah.
So I was thinking about so coffee does help you get you going, but you have been thinking about cutting down.
All right, so there's a double-sided reflection. Caffeine does keep you going during the day and feels important, and also you're thinking about cutting down. And you did the 2 things that I talked about too. You included both sides, but you also put his motivation for change second. So there'd be a double-sided reflection. A simple reflection could be, so you're thinking about cutting down your caffeine use. What else could we reflect here? Because he gave us a lot of stuff. Huh?
They say that you find a lot of advantages by using coffee.
Yes, indeed. Coffee seems to be important to you. There are a lot of advantages to you. It really helps you keep going. So there you're reflecting just one side of it. Or you could reflect just the other side, you know. Yeah, you're having your doubts about how much caffeine you drink because one just seems to lead to the next, you know. So there we got 4 possible reflections right there, you know. And when I'm listening to somebody, those things are going through my head of well, what could I say here? So I think I'll try the double-sided reflection here, and then Dr. Arun will respond. Yeah. So on one hand, coffee just seems important to you. It energizes you, keeps you going through the day, and at the same time, you're worried that you're drinking an awful lot of caffeine, and one just leads to the next.
yeah, I've been hearing that some or other negative things which is happening to people. For example, people are talking about I might get some cardiac issues with that, like, and obviously my family is upset about it, and they show their faces, and I'm not very comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. Good. Now we have a little more here to work with. Okay. Now, what would just be a simple reflection of one thing that he said?
So you're a bit concerned about your health.
Yeah. Your family is noticing and commenting about this. Yeah. What else is possible?
Could we amplify it and say your health is important to you, or your
Your
family
health is
is
good. Yeah. So you're going a little bit farther and saying, yeah, you pay attention to your health, and that's really important to you. So you're coming an underlying value. Good.
Could we say, sir, that do you worry that you might end up in a very hazardous health condition, as pointed out by others?
The content is there. I wouldn't ask it as a question, but I'd say you're concerned you might wind up with a health problem here. So there it is as a reflection, just turned down at the end. And why are questions different? It's just asking it as a question is a little more threatening somehow. And I can't even necessarily say why, but are you concerned you might have a health problem? The person just wants to back away from that a little bit, let alone if you say, aren't you concerned that you might have a health problem? The person backs away even more. Whereas with the statement, the person can stay with you. Yeah. All right, so just try a reflection here. So the two more things you mentioned are that your family's commenting on this and making faces at you. And you know that it can also have some cardiac consequences.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand these things, but see, I even thought about having some alternatives, maybe having green tea and all things. Everybody is suggesting, but come on, green tea for coffee. How do I live my life?
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Now we can continue the paragraph here. So he's saying, come on, green tea for coffee. What might be the next thing he would say about that?
It's
not much.
unnatural.
Really as good as coffee.
It's
to you.
just not as good as coffee. It just isn't a substitute. Yeah. And it just keeps the sentence going, you know. Now, you might worry that that's kind of reflecting sustained talk if you've thought ahead about motivational learning. I don't worry about that at this point. The conversation is going, and you know what often happens when you continue a paragraph with a little more sustained talk, the person then says, "Yeah, well, I know, but I also using too much or something." So they correct it themselves. They come back again. So that's just an illustration. Thank you for helping me with this. An illustration of what the process looks like that I want you to do. So it only be one round this time. So one person will be the speaker. One will offer to be the listener. But the listener doesn't alone have to come up with the reflections. You have some partners there, I hope, in your group, to help you think about what different reflections could we offer here. And it's also kind of an exercise in loosening up your thinking of, gee, there are a lot of things to reflect. There are a lot of things you could respond to, even with such a short conversation as we just had here. And then the listener gets to choose one of those, offer it, and the person says a little more. So we're allowing 15 minutes for that. I think unless there's a question about it, we can go into the breakout rooms and you can give this a try. And we'll have a chance to talk about discuss topics from today toward the end of this hour that we have, 2 hours we have together. But I just have one more topic to talk to you about, which is the next process after engaging, and that's the focusing process. And it's finding what you're going to be talking about. Remember, the underlying question with engaging is, can we take a walk together? And the underlying question in focusing is, where are we going? Now, where does your focus come from? I think usually it's from the person you're serving, usually from the client or the patient. They come with a concern that they present to you and say, this is what's troubling me, or this is what I'd like to talk about. Or I'm thinking about going to school. They just raise a topic that is what you're going to be talking about. Sometimes it comes from the context. So if you work, as I've said before, if you work in a smoking cessation program, no one wonders what the topic of conversation is going to be. You're going to be talking about smoking. And then sometimes it's the interviewer, the clinician, the physician, who in talking to the person is beginning to think about, maybe we need to talk about this. So a primary care physician, for example, is treating a patient who comes in time and again with gastrointestinal concerns and begins to wonder, maybe we should be talking about alcohol here. Yeah. So any of those sources can be where a focus is initiated, but it's not really a focus until both people are on board with it, until you've kind of agreed this is where we're going. And the outcome of focusing might be just a single goal. Here's the thing that I would like to work on. So with Dr. Arun, we were just talking about cutting down coffee, and that was a potential goal. It could be a whole set of goals. Yeah, I've got several different things I'd like to work on, and then the task is figuring out which of those is the place to start. Which of these might be it might have priority. A focus could just be a first step. So we're talking about a kind of complex goal that's going to take a while, but what's the next step? And what's the first thing you might try? It could also be a long-term goal, and then you've got multiple changes to move in that direction. So when we've talked about diabetes, for a person diagnosed with diabetes, there may be a number of things that need to change toward a goal of staying healthy, of not having complications, of keeping your blood sugar down, maybe even reversing diabetes. So there are a variety of things that you can do to move in that direction. So any of those things might become the focus of your work together. Here's something we developed that we call a bubble sheet. And this one is pertinent to diabetes, but it could be pertinent to whatever topic you're talking about. But notice there are a number of bubbles here, and each one of them has a possible change. So if you are a primary care physician, for example, you might say, well, we have a few minutes today still that we could talk, and here are a number of things that we could be talking about. Which of these might you like to talk about in the time that we have left today? So, and any one of those would be kind of moving in the direction of better health, and the patient says, well, I think I'd like to talk about decreasing my stress level. So then you have a conversation about that. So it's a structured way to propose multiple topics and just have the person pick out one of them that, what will be our subject today? What's the thing we're going to talk about today? You can also, and by the way, notice in the lower right, there's a circle with a question mark, because I always say, or maybe what you would like to talk about is not any of these things. And that's why there's this blank one or this one with a question mark at the bottom. So, what would you like to talk about in the time that we have remaining today? Sometimes you just start off with a blank bubble sheet. So you're working maybe with a new client, and what are we talking about? What are the concerns that you have? And you begin to fill in the bubbles with the different goals that the person is suggesting. So you can use this in a lot of ways, but it can be a handy way to find a focus within a complex situation. And then there's it happens that the direction is unclear. What's wrong? A person says everything is wrong. I don't know where to start. I don't know what's wrong. In that case, really good listening is important. And you begin to develop a list of concerns. And as I said, you might be filling in bubbles. So as you're having this conversation with someone, pieces start to emerge. And so you begin to keep track of those. Usually in this kind of situation, you're moving from general concerns to much more specific concerns over time. You're figuring out together what things need immediate attention, what's most urgent. So if, for example, the person is potentially suicidal, that one has some priority and some urgency to deal with. But what you're trying to do is to develop a clear focus together, a clear sense of where you're going together. And it is a negotiation process. It is a collaborative process. You as a provider may have ideas about what may be going on. Is there something that might be underlying all of these concerns that the person is presenting? Depression's a common one, for example, that can present with all kinds of different symptoms, physical, psychological, emotional, whatever. Yeah. And that might, then you're thinking to yourself, perhaps maybe we should be talking about this because I think this might be underlying everything that's going on. So you see, it's this negotiation, collaborative process between you and the person you're serving to figure out where are we going together. And that's what the focusing process is about. Now, the next time, what I'm going to do is move on to a different topic and an important one, which is beginning to talk about the evoking process, which is the one that really is most unique to motivational interviewing. And I'm going to talk about a specific piece of it next time, which is this concept of change talk that we have and how to recognize it, what it sounds like. Its opposite, sustained talk, and those are two poles of ambivalence, so there'll be some tuning of your ear so that when you hear something that's like change talk or sustained talk, that's something important you just heard that has to do with motivation for change and moving forward. So that's where we go the next time.